Hey guys, tonight we slip into a metal coffin beneath the waves, a creaking, oil-slicked German U-boat slicing silently through the Black Atlantic during World War II. You're not a soldier, not really. But that doesn't matter. You've been dropped into 1942, into a machine designed for war and discomfort, surrounded by 49 other half-awake, unwashed men. And guess what? You're staying here for weeks. You crouch through a hatch no wider than a trash can lid and instantly smack your head on a valve. Welcome aboard. The air hits you like a wall, warm, wet, and wrong. It smells like diesel fuel, boiled cabbage, and unbrushed teeth from every continent. You haven't even reached your bunk, but you're already sweating through your undershirt. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments so I know when and where you're drifting off with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck again and shuffle past a knot of sailors playing cards on a crate of potatoes. Every step echoes, your footfalls swallowed by the low hum of the diesel engine and the occasional metallic groan of the hull. Someone behind you coughs, deep and wet, and you try not to flinch. The air is so thick you're tempted to chew it. Good news, the crew says you'll stop noticing the smell after 3 or 4 days. Bad news, that's because your brain will just give up trying to process it. You're assigned a bunk, or rather, you're assigned a part-time bunk. It's part of the hot bunking rotation. When one guy gets up for duty, another guy gets in. The sheets are always warm. That might sound cozy until you realize the warmth is from another human who hasn't changed his socks in 2 weeks. You curl into the little metal alcove, knees tight to your chest, trying not to think about the fact that you're literally sleeping next to live torpedoes. If this boat gets hit in the right spot, you'll be vaporized before you can finish blinking. You learn quickly that silence is golden. Talking loudly is discouraged. The boat amplifies every noise. One sailor tells you, only half-jokingly, "If you sneeze, the Allies will find us." Another says, "If the torpedo doesn't kill you, the guy you woke up probably will." Your new boots don't help. The soles are too loud on the metal floor, so you're told to pad around in your socks. Socks that will never be dry again. You strip them off one night, hoping to let them breathe. By morning, they're still damp and have acquired a new texture that makes you wonder if they've started developing their own ecosystem. It's hard to get comfortable because the U-boat is constantly rocking, not in a pleasant hammock on a beach kind of way, but in an unpredictable, nausea-inducing corkscrew motion. You spend your first 3 days swallowing your own bile. A senior crewman hands you a crusty tin mug of water and mutters, "Don't let it hit the electrics this time." You laugh nervously. He doesn't. Oh, and there's condensation everywhere. The ceiling weeps like it's mourning your decision to come aboard. You wake up damp. You go to sleep damp. Your pillow is stuffed with what feels like wet sand. You begin to wonder if your bones are getting damp. Historians still argue whether the constant moisture contributed more to psychological breakdown or to trench foot, but the answer might just be yes. And you haven't even left the harbor yet. The captain finally gives the order to dive. Alarms blare softly, a kind of sad honk, like a goose giving up. You hear the ballast tanks emptying. The angle of the boat tilts. Your stomach flips as the world goes gray, then black. There's no ceremony to this, no epic music. You just go down. The deeper you descend, the louder the hull creaks. Metal under pressure doesn't scream, it groans, slow and resentful, like an old door with secrets. Every ping from sonar, every hollow echo, feels like it's aimed directly at your teeth. You cling to a pipe for stability as you pass the galley, a stretch of corridor with 2 hot plates and a man boiling something that smells like despair. Someone tells you it's turnip stew. Someone else says it's whatever was behind the potatoes in storage. You choose not to ask a third time. You meet the radio operator, hunched in a closet-sized room, lined with dials and glowing knobs. He wears headphones constantly, squinting at indecipherable squiggles on paper. Sometimes he chuckles softly, and no one knows why. One night he leans over and whispers, "I think I picked up Glenn Miller." Then he goes back to scribbling. Glenn Miller, by the way, vanished over the English Channel in 1944, and some folks still debate whether he was shot down or lost in fog. Either way, his ghost may have better reception than you. As the U-boat slides deeper into open water, the crew becomes quieter. There's an unspoken understanding that survival depends on being invisible. You become part of the machinery, breathing quietly, thinking slowly, trying to forget the sun exists. And even though you've only been here for 4 days, you're starting to feel it. That creeping fog in your head, that sense that time has melted into one long heartbeat. You've begun measuring the passage of time by how often the light flickers in the bathroom. The truth is, you probably won't survive this. Not because of enemy fire or sabotage, just because you're not built for it. You weren't trained to be a sardine in a tin can of doom. But here you are, and there's no going back. The hatch is sealed, the water is above you, and the only way is forward. You're on your 2nd rotation now, and the novelty, if you could call it that, is long gone. You're groggy, filthy, and thoroughly underqualified. The U-boat doesn't care. It keeps groaning forward through the deep like a tin-plated sea monster, and you're expected to pull your weight whether you know what you're doing or not. Your first official task: help crank the manual air scrubber. It's basically a metal box full of chemicals and spinning parts that tries to suck the carbon dioxide out of the air before the crew collectively keels over. You're told not to breathe too deeply near the soda lime. It causes chemical burns. Great. As if your lungs weren't already marinating in diesel and boiled socks. A petty officer hands you a wrench, gestures vaguely at some levers, and mutters, "Try not to flood the compartment." You chuckle, but no one else does. Because, apparently, someone has actually flooded the compartment before. Historians still argue whether training was intentionally rushed in the later years of the war, or if it was just desperation. But by 1943, the Kriegsmarine was drafting in barbers, farmers, and yes, teenagers. So, no pressure. You try your best to fake it, to nod seriously, squint at dials like you understand their purpose, and repeat whatever the officer says in a tone that implies experience. This works until something hisses unexpectedly and sprays a stream of freezing air directly into your armpit. You yelp. The crew stares. One man mutters, "Rookie." There's no time to nurse your wounded ego, because the boat is shifting again. Silent orders. Men shuffle. The diving planes adjust with a heavy thunk that rattles your teeth. You're going deeper. Your ears pop. Your stomach clenches. And the worst part? You still don't know what you're actually supposed to be doing. One of the officers assigns you to lookout rotation. You get to stand in the conning tower, exposed to the wet wind and salty air, scanning the horizon for Allied ships. You feel a thrill of importance until you realize you're basically bait. The first person to see a destroyer also becomes the first to get shot at. Still, there's something weirdly beautiful about it. You're up there in the middle of nowhere, icy wind biting your cheeks, waves smashing against the hull like they're angry you exist. A seal bobs in the distance. It blinks at you, unimpressed, then disappears. You envy the seal. It can swim wherever it wants. You're inside a haunted sausage can. Your next shift is bilge duty. No, it's not glamorous. And yes, it smells exactly like the name suggests. You crouch beside a glistening metal pool of sludge, siphoning out a toxic soup of oil, seawater, and mystery gunk with what looks like a modified turkey basta. The stench clings to your skin like betrayal. You start wondering if your body will ever smell normal again. Spoiler, it won't. Someone slaps your shoulder and says, "If it makes you feel better, the commander once passed out in the bilge." It doesn't. You try to ask questions, how the torpedoes work, where the fresh water comes from, what to do if the captain starts hallucinating. But the answers are vague at best. It works when it works, one sailor shrugs. When it doesn't, we pray. In a quieter moment, an older sailor sits next to you and tells you about the Wilhelm Bauer, a U-boat that resurfaced decades later with all its compartments eerily intact. He says some people believe the original crew went mad and sealed themselves inside, just waiting. You laugh nervously. He doesn't. The truth is, you're expected to learn by watching. No manuals, no classes. You just hover near someone competent and try to imitate them without breaking anything. You develop a sixth sense for when something's about to go wrong, like when the chief engineer starts muttering to himself, or when the cook begins sharpening a spoon. One day, you accidentally bump a valve in the engine room. Alarms don't blare, but you feel a noticeable change in the boat's rhythm, like it's suddenly holding its breath. An officer stomps in and glares at the panel. You prepare to confess, but instead, he sighs and flicks a different valve. The boat exhales. "Don't touch that one," he says. You nod like it's helpful. You begin to notice how calm the experienced crewmen are, not because they're confident, but because panic takes too much energy. They move like ghosts, expressionless, conserving oxygen and emotion. You, on the other hand, are still running on cortisol and wet bread. At night, you dream of skylines and fresh air. You remember your bed, your real bed, with pillows that don't reek of other men's shampoo. You long for the sound of birds, of footsteps on dry pavement. Your bunkmate says he dreams of biting into an apple. He hasn't seen a fresh apple in a year. You quietly vow to send this man a fruit basket if either of you survive. And the nightmares? Oh, they come fast. You jolt awake, heart racing, convinced you forgot to shut a valve or launch a torpedo. You dream of endless corridors, flooding chambers, and screaming metal. One time you swear you heard laughter coming from the storage hold. You don't check. You don't want to know. You start carrying a small, lucky charm, a coin, a ring, something from home, because you've noticed almost everyone else does. The torpedo officer has a rabbit's foot. The cook carries a wooden spoon with a carved heart. One man clutches a scrap of lace so often the edges have turned brown. No one explains these things, but you understand anyway. Eventually, you realize you're not surviving aboard this U-boat. You're enduring. And endurance has a price: constant anxiety, decaying hygiene, and a brain that now flinches at silence. And still, you march forward, because the only way out is through. Or down. You wake up to someone's foot in your face, and the sharp smell of onions. It takes a moment to remember where you are, not a dream, not a prank, but still very much inside the iron stomach of a German U-boat. You try to turn over in your bunk, but can't. The narrow metal shelf has exactly 8 inches of vertical space, and your shoulder has fused with the bulkhead. Then it hits you. Literally. The stench. Forget everything you thought you knew about bad smells. The air down here is a complex ecosystem of despair. It's not just that it smells awful, it smells alive. Like every odor is fighting for dominance: sweat, mildew, diesel fuel, fermented cabbage, socks, more socks, something vaguely chemical, and the lingering presence of spoiled meat that may or may not still be in the galley. There's also something sour in the mix, like old pickles. But you haven't seen pickles since day 3, so either they're haunting the air or someone's armpits have gone supernaturally wrong. Historians still argue whether the infamous U-boat smell was exaggerated by propaganda or downplayed by veterans trying to forget it. All we know for sure is that no amount of nose breathing can save you now. You shuffle into the corridor, ducking wires and pipes. A man brushes past you, and your shirts make that awful wet slapping noise as the sweat mixes. You shudder. There's no privacy, no escape. Everyone smells, including you. Especially you. The ventilation system, if you can call it that, was designed to push air around, not clean it. There's no air conditioning, and the only fresh air comes from occasional surfacing or opening the conning tower hatch. That's maybe 10 minutes of breeze before it's sealed again, and you go back to breathing warm, recycled regret. One guy tries to mask the stench with a cologne he brought from home. Big mistake. The potent scent mixes with engine fumes and turns into something noxious. He earns the nickname Sturm Parfum and is banned from using it ever again. You find yourself fixating on smells. You can tell who's walking past you just by the scent signature. The torpedo guy smells like metal and vinegar. The cook like garlic and sadness. The radio operator has somehow gone scent neutral, and that's now the most suspicious thing about him. There's a running joke among the crew: if the Allies ever want to locate you, they don't need sonar. They just need a good nose, and honestly, it's not a joke. One day, the toilet backs up. Just one toilet for 50 people. You'd think that would make everyone panic, but it doesn't. This has happened before. It's practically a rite of passage. A young crewman named Felix, he's barely out of school, draws the short straw. He dons a pair of elbow-high gloves and disappears behind a bulkhead with a wrench and a bucket. You hear some swearing, then gurgling, then silence. 20 minutes later, he re-emerges, victorious but altered. No one talks to him for the rest of the day. He just stares at the floor and eats his soup without blinking. Soup, by the way, is the best-case meal. The worst case? Something called U-Bootenwurst, a grayish sausage with the consistency of wet bread and the smell of fear. You try not to think about it, but it's everywhere. In your stew, in your sandwich, maybe even in your dreams. Still, the worst smell isn't the food, or the bodies, or the engine oil. It's the moment after surfacing, when the hatch opens, and you finally get a breath of sea air and realize how bad it really is inside. You didn't notice until now. You were too used to it. But that first whiff of outside hits you like a revelation, and suddenly the truth dawns. You've been stewing in a human crock-pot. A sailor once compared it to living inside someone else's bad decision. Another called it a musty hug from a demon. You stop arguing with these descriptions. They're not wrong. To cope, some guys stuff cotton in their noses. Others smear toothpaste under their nostrils like makeshift vapor rub. One man wraps his scarf over his face, Wild West style, like he's about to rob a train instead of stand in line for canned beets. And then there's the clothes. Laundry? That's adorable. There is no laundry. You wear the same uniform for the entire patrol. It stains, it stiffens, it begins to develop a personality. You hang it above your bunk to air out, which is really just a way of sharing the suffering. Some men sleep in their clothes, some strip down to boxers and pray their neighbors don't snore and sweat. You do what you can. By week 2, you've entered what the veterans call the funk plateau. At this stage, your sense of smell has abandoned you like a smart friend at a bad party. You no longer flinch when someone lifts their arms. You even stop worrying about your own stench. It's freeing, in a disturbing sort of way. You start to find comfort in the familiar smells. A whiff of boot polish reminds you of order. The cloying scent of condensed milk brings memories of home. The scent of oil and steel becomes background noise. This is your life now. Your wet, funky, canned life. You do have one small victory. Your bunkmate has agreed to rotate foot positions during sleep. Every other night, you get the pillow side instead of the toe side. It's not exactly a spa day, but you take your wins where you can get them. At one point, you overhear 2 crewmen arguing. One swears he smelled flowers in the galley. The other accuses him of going mad. They both might be right. Your brain starts making phantom sense, little olfactory mirages. One moment you swear you're catching a hint of cinnamon rolls. The next, you realize it's just grease and loneliness. So here you are, immersed in the unforgettable bouquet of underwater warfare. The U-boat doesn't kill you quickly. It slowly seeps into your pores, your lungs, your thoughts. You don't just smell the U-boat. You become the U-boat. And as you lie back in your damp bunk, staring at the rust-flecked ceiling, you wonder, will the smell ever leave you? Or is it the price of diving deep into the belly of the war machine? Someone elbows you in the ribs. It's your turn to sleep, if you can call it that. You shuffle toward your bunk like a zombie, stepping over legs, coils of rope, and a sailor inexplicably snoring into a box of canned beets. You try not to think too hard about it. The bunk is still warm from the last guy. Of course it is. There are only about 30 beds on the entire boat, and nearly twice as many men. It's hot bunking hell, and now it's your shift. You wedge yourself into the metal shelf, barely wider than a coffin lid, press your spine against a wall that's suspiciously sticky, and tug a thin, stained blanket over your knees. There's a foot sticking out of the bunk above yours. You hope it stays there. There is no privacy. None. You're always within arm's reach of someone else, eating, sleeping, using the bathroom, even dreaming. Every sigh, groan, and scratch echoes. You've learned more about your bunkmate's snoring pattern than your own heartbeat. One guy talks in his sleep. Another whistles. You'd give your rations for a single hour alone. It's not just the beds. Everything is stacked, crammed, overlapped. There are lockers under tables, storage above toilets, and torpedoes nestled like bedtime companions next to sleeping crew. Yes, really. Some of the bunks are built directly over the torpedo tubes. One sailor affectionately calls his old boomstick. You try not to think about it. And then there are the pipes. Pipes above you, below you, beside you. Always warm, always dripping. Some hiss. Some make a faint knocking sound, like a ghost politely asking to come in. You learn to sleep sideways, knees up, arms tucked in, neck bent just enough to avoid the steam valve. Your body becomes a question mark. The galley doubles as a meeting space. The navigation table is sometimes used to dice onions. One guy cuts his toenails near the radio room, and no one even blinks. Personal space is now an imaginary friend. You talk about it fondly, but haven't seen it in weeks, and don't even think about stretching. If you extend your leg, someone's getting kneed. If you sneeze without warning, you might accidentally start a brawl. One sailor swears a guy got punched just for yawning too loudly. You're not sure it's true, but you've been tempted. The toilet is a saga of its own. There's only one. It's located in the bow, just past the torpedoes, behind a curtain that's more suggestion than barrier. The flushing mechanism is a complex dance of valves and pressure release. If you mess it up, you might flood the compartment with raw sewage. Which, by the way, has happened. Twice. You learn to hold it, plan your timing, and pray for mercy. There's an unspoken rhythm to everything. You eat in shifts. You sleep in shifts. You bathe. Well, you don't. Not really. There's no shower. A full-body wash consists of rubbing yourself with a wet rag and pretending it helps. Sometimes you get a tin cup of warm water to dab behind your ears like a disappointed Victorian child. That's it. One sailor hangs up a towel as a makeshift curtain and announces, "Welcome to my suite." No one laughs, but everyone secretly respects the effort. And yet, despite the crushing lack of space, you start to adapt. Your body learns to shrink, to fold itself neatly like a bad idea. You sleep with one leg draped over a pipe and call it ergonomic. You eat hunched over, elbow to elbow, like a row of cranky penguins. You stop flinching when someone brushes past you with their elbow in your soup. Historians still debate whether the layout of U-boats was a design failure or a brutal necessity. The Type 7 boats, like every inch of space, had a function. Unfortunately, human happiness wasn't one of them. At night, you dream of doors that open outward, of chairs with backs, of showers where you don't have to hug a torpedo to rinse your feet. Your muscles cramp from sleeping in strange positions, your back feels like a corkscrew, and your neck makes a clicking sound when you turn it too fast. But the worst part isn't the sleeping, or the sitting, or even the toilet ballet. It's the simple fact that there's nowhere to go. No deck to pace, no window to stare out. Just endless walls, metal pipes, and the smell of 50 overripe men slowly turning into soup. One guy snaps, quietly, at first. He starts muttering to himself, counting things that don't exist. You hear him whispering the names of countries, then fish, then cheeses. Eventually, the commander gives him extra radio duty, a tactic affectionately known as tuning the madness away. It doesn't work. You find your own ways to cope. You count rivets. You play guess that creak with yourself. You try to remember the layout of your old apartment. Was the fridge on the left or the right? Did the bedroom have 2 windows or 3? You can't remember anymore. That frightens you more than the torpedoes. Some of the crew find creative outlets. One sailor has carved tiny faces into his bunk frame with a spoon. Another keeps a diary written in code, possibly to hide his poetry. You try journaling, but you run out of things to say after "still cramped, still smelly, still here." Despite everything, you begin to feel connected. Not in a friendship way, no one here is that open, but in a shared suffering, we're all stuck in this metal tube of doom sort of way. A grunted nod becomes a bonding ritual. A shared can of sardines, practically a date. By now, the idea of space feels foreign. You daydream about empty rooms, long hallways, a seat with armrests. And yet, when the boat finally surfaces and you climb into the conning tower for a breath of fresh air, the openness of the sky makes you dizzy. You grip the rail, overwhelmed. The sea stretches out in every direction, and for a brief moment you miss the walls. Then someone passes. Your socks are wet again. They've been wet for so long you've forgotten what dry even feels like. You slip them off, carefully, since they're now more sponge than clothing, and wring them out over a rust-streaked bucket. A small grey puddle collects beneath your feet. You squint at it. Could be seawater, could be foot sweat, could be soup runoff. You stop wondering. No one told you that moisture would be the enemy aboard a U-boat. Not bullets, not bombs, moisture. It's everywhere. Condensation drips from the ceilings, beads across the pipes, seeps into every fabric and fiber. And the socks? They're the front lines of the war. You hang them from a pipe above your bunk, hoping they'll dry overnight. They don't. Instead, they become cold and rubbery, like sea slugs. So you just put them back on the next day. It's like stepping into 2 chilled anchovies. Most of the crew has given up entirely. You see bare feet more often now, pale, pruned, sometimes bandaged. One man wears his boots without socks, which feels both illegal and brave. Another just goes barefoot, his calloused toes blackened from weeks of grime. Freedom, he whispers. But you can tell he misses the socks. There's a rotating foot inspection schedule. The medic, who doubles as the cook when not handling lice outbreaks, goes bunk to bunk, flashlight in hand, checking for signs of trench foot. He peels off a bandage from one sailor's heel, and you gag. The skin underneath is soft, white, and sloughing off like wet paper. Good, the medic says. Not too infected. Trench foot is the ever-present threat. Caused by prolonged exposure to dampness, it turns your feet into tender, rotting logs. The crew has developed tricks, powdering toes with flour, airing out boots during surface runs, even rubbing alcohol into their arches, if they can find any. Someone once tried toothpaste. It didn't help. You try to keep your spirits up. You hum a little. You invent foot-related haikus, socks like sunken boats, moisture whispers in the dark. Mildew hugs my soul. It doesn't help much. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll of foot rot and skin decay was underestimated in naval warfare. Some claim it led to lapses in concentration, increased aggression, even hallucinations. Honestly, from your perspective, it all tracks. But it's not just your feet. Your skin itches constantly. Behind your knees, in your scalp, under your arms, you scratch one spot until it bleeds, then bandage it with a scrap of old gauze and the sleeve of a torn undershirt. Hygiene aboard a U-boat is theoretical. You get a tiny chunk of soap every 2 weeks. It smells like glue and does about as much good. The sinks are barely more than trickling faucets, and you have to pump them manually. Washing your face becomes a workout. Washing your body becomes an event. You give up on clean and aim for less crusty. Toothbrushes are shared in a horrifying game of chance. You use yours with military discipline, hoarding the last crumbs of toothpaste like treasure. One man brushes with salt, another chews mint leaves he keeps in his sock. It's a choice. You notice odd rashes forming along your wrists, a kind of prickly heat rash maybe, or something worse. The medic glances at it and says, "Should be fine unless it weeps." You ask what weeps means in this context. He walks away. At one point, the air becomes heavy with the scent of vinegar. You think it might be lunch, but no, it's someone soaking their shirt to kill lice. It doesn't work. The lice come back. They always come back. They always come back. They are the true captains of this boat. One sailor starts scratching so violently you worry he'll skin himself. You offer him your spare shirt. It's damp and crusty, but it's the thought that counts. He nods in gratitude, wraps it around his neck, and says, "It's like hugging a swamp. I love it." The air never gets better. Even surfaced, the breeze only teases the upper decks. Below, it's a sauna of human suffering. When the engines run, the heat rises. Metal surfaces burn to the touch. You learn to move through the boat like a ninja. Quick touches, sudden hops, silent curses. And still, the socks stay wet. They're not just uncomfortable, they're demoralizing. Dry socks are hope. Dry socks mean you've surfaced, you've aired out, you're alive. Every time you slide your feet into damp wool, it's like being reminded that you are still very much underwater, in every sense of the word. At meals, no one talks anymore. You hear chewing, A few muffled belches, maybe a whispered prayer over a can of green beans. Your mind starts to wander. You fantasize about towels, about a clean pair of cotton briefs, about showers where the water pressure isn't your own spit. You begin to understand why old sailors look so distant when they talk about the war. It's not the combat that broke them. It's the endless, grinding discomfort. The war against dampness. The daily humiliations of mildew and rashes. The knowledge that your body is slowly fermenting and there's nothing you can do about it. You find mold growing on the edge of your pillow. You name it Jeff. Jeff is your emotional support fungus now. At one point, a sailor bets his chocolate ration that he can dry a pair of socks on the engine room pipes. He wins, but the socks melt slightly and fuse to the metal. The chief engineer is not amused. "You want dry?" he growls. "Wait until the hull breaches. It's real dry in a coffin." And you laugh, because what else can you do? So you roll your damp socks into a ball, wedge them under your bunk, and prepare for your next shift. Your toes squish inside your boots like jellyfish. Your skin itches. Your bones ache. But you carry on, because the ocean doesn't care how wet. The silence breaks like a scream. A thunderous boom shudders through the hull, followed by a rapid series of jolts, like a giant metal fist pounding from the outside. You freeze. Everyone freezes. For one long second, the only sound is the sudden absence of breath. Depth charges. You don't hear them drop at first. They don't whistle like in movies. They just exist, then explode. The pressure blast travels faster than thought, smacking the steel shell of your world like a hammer from Poseidon himself. Your ears pop. Your teeth rattle. A light bulb flickers, then dies. You clutch a pipe, heart doing its best impression of Morse code. A sailor nearby hisses, "Hold on to something," just as the next charge detonates. It's closer. Much closer. The floor lifts under you briefly, like the whole boat just took a breath. You don't scream. No one does. There's no time for that. Instead, the U-boat responds like a living thing, creaking, groaning, twisting under the weight of the sea and the stress of survival. Depth charge roulette has begun. Above you, somewhere in the crushing blue, an Allied destroyer hunts you with ears and explosives. The enemy knows you're here. They don't know where exactly, so they guess, and every guess could be the end. The captain hisses orders down the corridor, whispers, sharp and fast. Silent running. All machinery goes dead. Lights dim to a dull red. The humming dies. Now the only sounds are the creaks of the hull and your own blood in your ears. You don't move. You barely breathe. The engines shut down so the enemy sonar won't catch your vibrations. The silence is suffocating. Even your thoughts feel too loud. Another blast. Closer still. You taste rust in your mouth. You think you might have bitten your tongue. Or maybe it's just the recycled air. You can't tell anymore. The crew doesn't panic, not because they're fearless, but because they've done this before. Their eyes glaze, not with terror, but with a dull, focused submission. If the charges hit, they hit. If they don't, you live another hour. That's the deal. Historians still argue whether Allied sonar was more effective than depth charges themselves. Some say the real weapon was psychological. Because that's what this is. War as psychological torture. You never see the enemy. You never fire back. You just listen to explosions and hope none of them turn your home into a pressure-cooked tomb. The U-boat shudders again. A pipe bursts near the aft section, hissing steam into the corridor. A sailor slaps a towel against it, tying it off with practiced panic. No one speaks. No one cheers when it stops. There's no victory here, only delay. You glance at the pressure gauge, something you don't understand but now watch religiously. The needle jumps slightly every few seconds, like it's flinching too. You want to ask someone what that means. You don't. Better not to know. Time stops. Minutes pass. Maybe hours. The depth charges stop falling. The destroyer must think it got you. Or maybe it got bored. Or maybe it's circling around for another pass. Then the quiet sets in. The true, awful quiet. Because after the boom and terror, the silence feels worse. It feels wrong. Like the ocean is holding its breath, waiting to see if you flinch. Somewhere, a bolt snaps loudly. Just a ping of contracting metal. But in the silence, it feels like a gunshot. One sailor mutters a prayer in a language you don't recognize. Another closes his eyes and taps out a rhythm with his fingers, probably a childhood lullaby. You try to count your heartbeats. You lose track at 37. The boat is sitting deep now, much deeper than it should be. Beyond safe depth, the captain's gamble. Hide in the pressure zone where sonar bounces weirdly and hope the hull holds. It's a game of physics, engineering, and blind faith. You feel it in your bones, the weight of the ocean pressing in. 400 feet of water overhead, maybe more. You imagine it as a solid wall of dark, indifferent death. There's a legend among the crew, one they share only during surface runs when morale peaks. A U-boat once dove too deep, trying to escape. The hull compressed, inch by inch, until it simply vanished. No wreckage, no oil slick, just gone. Crushed into silence. The engineer says it's not true, that boats implode dramatically. But you prefer the vanishing. It's tidier. Then, like a whisper in the dark, the engines come back online. The lights brighten by a notch. Machinery hums again. A vibration under your feet returns, like the boat is waking up. You exhale. Didn't realize you were holding your breath. No one cheers. No high fives. Just the silent choreography of men returning to duty. Someone offers you a piece of hard candy. You take it. It tastes like chalk. It's the best thing you've ever eaten. You climb back into your bunk, if only to lie still and pretend things are normal. But now everything feels changed. The mattress is harder. The air is colder. Your hands won't stop shaking. You dream of explosions, muffled, distant, rhythmic. You wake up halfway through a dream of drowning, only to find your own sweat soaking the sheets. You stare at the ceiling, wide-eyed, waiting for the next charge. It doesn't come. Not tonight. But you know it will. Again. And again. That's life aboard a U-boat. Not just waiting for death, but learning to live in the space just after it might have happened. There's no sun down here. No moonlight. No stars. Just the same red glow of overhead bulbs and the persistent hum of machinery. You've officially lost all sense of time. Is it morning? Evening? Tuesday? You gave up asking days ago. At some point, one of the officers switched the clocks forward 6 hours for tactical reasons. Another sailor shrugged and said, "Time is a land thing." And that was that. In the belly of the U-boat, time melts. There's no window to peek through, no sunrise to anchor your rhythm. The artificial lighting cycles between a dull red and an anemic yellow, but not on any schedule that makes sense. You might eat a bowl of cabbage stew at what your body thinks is 3 a.m., then take a nap at lunch. Your dreams are strange. Not nightmares, not exactly, more like long, looping nonsense. You dream of walking endless hallways that go nowhere, of being late for something, forever. One time you dream you're back home, but your apartment is filled with diesel fumes and everyone talks like a sonar ping. It's not just you. The whole crew is sleepwalking through reality. One man nods off while standing. Another keeps forgetting what job he's doing mid-task. You watch a mechanic tighten the same bolt 3 times in a row. Nobody says anything. You just nod like it makes sense. A form of group hypnosis sets in, everyone drifting in and out of function. You sit down for what you think is your watch duty, only to be told it ended 2 hours ago. Or maybe it hasn't started yet. Who knows? Historians still argue whether the Germans underestimated the psychological impact of this eternal now. The boats were marvels of engineering, but emotional prisons. The mind, deprived of the sun, begins to rust. A petty officer tries to lighten the mood. He paints a fake sunrise on the wall above the galley using tomato paste and mustard. It's awful. It's also the best thing you've seen in weeks. Another sailor carves tally marks into a wooden spoon to track days, but gives up somewhere in the 40s, scowling. I think I counted 1 day twice. You laugh. He doesn't. Red light dominates everything. It's used to preserve night vision, but on a submarine with no night or day, it just casts a hellish hue on the world. Everyone looks like sleep-deprived demons. Eyes sunken, cheeks hollow, teeth yellowing from canned milk and stress. You look in a mirror once, briefly, and wish you hadn't. The noise never stops. It's a low, constant orchestra of groans, hisses, thuds, and that maddening engine thrum. Some guys swear they can't sleep without the sound anymore. They call it the lullaby of doom. You start imagining sounds that aren't there. A baby crying. A telephone ringing. Once, you're sure you hear a dog barking. You laugh it off until a senior crewman says, "Yeah, the barking's normal, means your brain's adjusting." That's somehow not comforting. There's a rhythm to it all, sure, but it's the rhythm of a washing machine tumbling reality around your skull. No breaks, no weekends, no 9 to 5. Just endless tasks, and sweat, and stew, and damp socks. Some try to keep structure. The officer of the watch writes the date on a chalkboard, even though it's wrong half the time. One man wears a wristwatch religiously, tapping it every hour to make sure it's still ticking. Another reads the same book over and over again. Treasure Island, ironically. At least they had wind, he grumbles. You try to anchor yourself with rituals. Brush your teeth at the same hour every day, even if that hour doesn't exist. You hum the same song before sleeping, quietly, to yourself. You write letters in your head to people you'll never see again, narrating your thoughts just to feel linear. Still, the disorientation seeps into your bones. You pour tea into a bowl, and don't realize it until someone asks why you're eating soup with a fork. You blink slowly. Just mixing it up, you mutter. There's one small clock above the nav table. It ticks defiantly, smugly. But nobody trusts it anymore. It might as well be decorative. You start wondering if this is what eternity feels like. Not fire and brimstone, just fluorescent lighting and lukewarm turnip mash forever. Then there's the mess with sleep. You're allotted 4 hours at a time, but rarely get all of it. Alarms, shifts, unexpected drills, they all chew into your dreams, and even when you do sleep, it's light. The kind of sleep where your ears never quite turn off, where your hands still twitch from imaginary tasks. Someone once joked that submarines are proof humans weren't meant to live underwater. Fish don't get insomnia, he said, brushing crumbs off his chest. You want to argue that fish also don't live on sauerkraut and existential dread, but you're too tired. You've started hallucinating a little, nothing serious, just flickers. Movement in the corner of your eye. The brief sensation that a crewmate said your name when he didn't. Once you swear the torpedo tubes are breathing. You don't mention it. The radio operator keeps a diary. He's the only one who knows what time it actually is. coordinated by signals from HQ. He never shares. You suspect he likes having that power. "You'll thank me when you forget your birthday," he says. The officers try to keep morale up. Jokes are told. A harmonica appears one evening, and someone plays a mournful rendition of Lily Marlene. You cry, just a little. You tell yourself it's the humidity. One sailor stages a sunrise ceremony during surfacing. He opens a can of apricots and holds it aloft, chanting in mock reverence. Everyone laughs. The fruit is gone in under a minute. Eventually, the outside world fades. It becomes something you visit only occasionally, like a dream. The ocean is just another bulkhead. The sun might still exist, but you wouldn't bet on it. You start to think in meters instead of minutes, in pressure instead of plans, and somewhere in this murky haze of time and timelessness, you realize the U-boat doesn't just take you beneath the sea. It takes you out of time altogether. A metal ghost ship floating in an endless now. You sit on an upturned crate, spoon in hand, trying to convince yourself that what's in your bowl is edible. It's gray, lumpy, smells faintly like feet and onions. Maybe it's some kind of stew, or yesterday's stew recycled into today's surprise. Whatever it is, you chew it slowly, cautiously, regretfully. Mealtime aboard a World War II U-boat is not a highlight. It's an endurance test with salt. The first week is manageable. Fresh bread, sausages, even real butter if you're lucky. But fresh supplies spoil quickly in the humid belly of the boat. After that, it's all canned everything. Canned ham, canned beans, canned spinach, canned, well, no one knows what that one is. Some say it's horse. Others say it's mythological. Food is stored in every nook and cranny, literally. Loaves of bread stuffed behind control panels. Onions hanging from hooks above the toilet. Sausages draped like garlands over the torpedoes. It's like living inside a deranged grocery store, curated by someone who's never used a fridge. There's a running joke among the crew. If the torpedoes don't get us, the cabbage will. And it's true. Fermented cabbage, also known as sauerkraut, is everywhere. It's the great equalizer. Breakfast, cabbage. Dinner, cabbage stew. Midnight snack, cold cabbage with a spoon. And oh, the smell. It seeps into everything. Your clothes, your hair, your dreams. One sailor swears he caught the scent of sauerkraut while surfaced in the Arctic. Another believes the cabbage is watching him. Historians still argue whether the German Navy's over-reliance on canned and pickled foods contributed to morale collapse. Some point to low vitamin levels. Others blame cabbage-induced madness. Either way, no one's eating well. Fresh water is rationed. Most of it goes to the engines and batteries. The crew gets what's left, doled out in stingy metal cups. You're allowed tea, but it's not really tea. It's hot water with a whisper of something vaguely plant-like. Still, it's warm. You treasure it. You miss fruit. The craving hits hard around week 3. Someone mentions apples, and you swear you can taste them. Bananas become a fantasy, like unicorns or peace. One guy claims to have seen a real orange once. Just one. Everyone hates him briefly. To fill you up, the cook makes a lot of stodge, potato mash, turnip loaf, and something everyone calls U-boat pudding. No one knows what's in it. It jiggles aggressively. Tastes like glue, but it's calorie-dense and doesn't move when the boat rolls, so it's a win. The galley is a single corner of the corridor, wedged between pipes and panic. One man cooks for 50 using 2 hot plates and the power of sheer resentment. He's called chef, but responds to oi, no, and seriously, this again? He does his best. Honestly. But there's only so much you can do with shelf-stable sausage and beans that predate the war. The worst part? Smell travels. The moment a meal is being prepared, the entire boat knows. Stomachs growl. People hover near the galley like stray cats. If it's something remotely good, like preserved beef hash, morale briefly lifts. If it's that weird beige casserole again, a quiet despair sets in. You get one chocolate bar per mission. Just one. Most guys save it for a low moment, birthdays, depth charge days, or when someone says, "I miss my dog," and everyone collectively stares into the middle distance. You guard that chocolate like it's a holy relic. One sailor trades his for a spoonful of real jam. He later cries. Quietly. Some guys experiment, mixing different canned goods together. Corned beef and pickles. Beans and mustard. Once, someone poured coffee into mashed potatoes. He hasn't been seen since. The only fresh thing that occasionally shows up. Mold. Fuzzy green surprises appear on bread loaves and cheese blocks. You just cut around it and carry on. Adds flavor, someone mutters. Adds penicillin, someone else replies. And then there's the flatulence. A boat full of men living off canned beans and pickled cabbage creates an atmosphere. You get used to it. Kind of. It's just part of the air now. You stop reacting. When someone lets one rip during a briefing, no one even blinks. You carry on, eyes watering slightly, trying not to breathe through your nose. There are food rituals, though. Birthday? You get the last pickle. Sink a ship? Double potato portions. One man claims he was given a single boiled egg after 3 months at sea. He stared at it for 10 minutes before eating it. Reverently. On Sundays, if it is Sunday, you might get powdered eggs or canned fish with a fancy label. The cook makes a ceremony of it, holding up the tin like a prize, shaking it to guess what's inside. He's wrong half the time. No one minds. And then there's the meal you'll never forget. Mystery meat. It appears mid-mission, no label, just a dented can with a faded letter on the lid. Could be pork, could be possum. It tastes like both. You all eat it anyway. You're starving. It's protein. You spend the next day taking turns at the toilet. Worth it. You learn to eat fast. Not because the food is delicious, but because lingering means cold stew and fewer seconds away from the noise and the smell. Meals are functional, not joyful. But they're also breaks. Breathers. Moments where you sit, even if it's shoulder to shoulder on a crate of potatoes. So you chew your gray lump. You sip your salty tea. And you dream of fruit, of color, of something with a crunch. One day, someone finds a forgotten can of peaches at the bottom of the food locker. The crew practically weeps. It's shared among 12 men, half a slice each. It tastes like heaven, like sunlight. For a moment, everything is quiet, peaceful. Then someone burps cabbage, and the spell breaks. You stare at the ceiling. Well, the patch of metal a foot above your nose, and wonder how long it's been since anyone said anything truly new. Conversations loop. Jokes repeat. You've heard the same story about the guy who outran a seagull at port 9 times. You're starting to think he was the seagull. Boredom aboard a U-boat isn't just a mood, it's a force. A creeping, inescapable fog that clings to your brain like seaweed. Time stretches, then collapses. You blink, and it's been 3 hours. You blink again, and it's been 30 seconds. With no sunlight, no clocks, and nowhere to go, your mind begins to look inward and finds nothing but repeating patterns and stale jokes. You play cards with the same 3 guys every day. You know who cheats. You know who hums while thinking. You know exactly how long each of them will stare at their cards before folding. The game itself becomes secondary to the rhythm of it. Shuffle, deal, lose. Repeat. One guy carves tiny boats from bits of scrap wood and string. They're actually impressive, little submarines with thread periscopes and bottle cap propellers. He lines them along his bunk like trophies. One goes missing. There's a full-blown investigation. Turns out someone flushed it for fun. Tensions spike. Some sailors keep journals. Others write fake letters they'll never send, to people who don't exist. One man reads the same dog-eared crime novel over and over. After the 6th time, he begins assigning roles from the book to the crew. The bosun is definitely the murderer, he says. You start to believe him. Then there's the singing. It starts as humming, soft, tuneless, harmless. But then someone begins singing old German folk songs. Another joins in. By week 4, it's a full chorus. Off-key, out of sync, but heartfelt. It's either charming or terrifying, depending on your sleep schedule. You try to sketch a comic strip about a sardine stuck in a can. It's a little too close to home. You abandon it halfway through and eat the pencil. And then there are the arguments. Not over strategy or mechanics, but over nonsense. One near fistfight breaks out over whether a seal is technically a fish. Another flares up when someone insists pickled eggs are better than fresh ones. The fact that no one on board has seen a fresh egg in months doesn't matter. Historians still argue whether morale truly collapsed on long patrols or if it simply mutated into something else. What you're seeing now isn't depression, it's transformation. Everyone's mind slowly adapting to a world where nothing changes and time is just an annoying rumor. The chief engineer begins talking to the engine. Not yelling, not joking. Talking. Gently. Like it's a stubborn child. Come on, mein Kleiner, he mutters while adjusting the throttle. Let's not embarrass ourselves today. You never ask about it. Frankly, it's working. You hear laughter from the torpedo room one night. Real laughter. It echoes down the corridor like a ghost. You go to check. Turns out they've built a sock puppet theater. The show is The Great Submarine Adventure. It's surprisingly nuanced. One puppet dies nobly. Another opens a bakery. Everyone claps. Someone starts drawing a mural on the wall near the galley using coal dust and soup grease. It begins as a seascape. Over time, it turns into an abstract spiral. By the 3rd week, it's just eyes. Watching eyes. No one mentions it, but you all feel it. You find yourself doing things just to feel something. Rearranging your locker. Counting the bolts in the ceiling. Spinning a spoon on the table until it falls over. You make a game of it. Guess how many spins before it tips. You play it for 45 minutes. Sleep becomes a form of time travel. Even if it's short and shallow, it takes you away. You start looking forward to naps the way people on land look forward to vacations. Your bunk becomes your sanctuary, your cocoon of familiar dampness and foot odor. Sometimes you just sit, not meditating, not relaxing, just existing, staring into the middle distance with a can of beans in hand, wondering if you've always had this birthmark, or if it's new. You ask your bunkmate. He squints. I think it's growing. Everyone has their weird. The guy who trims his fingernails into shapes, the one who recites multiplication tables out loud. The guy who thinks he can sense when the boat changes course based on tooth vibrations. They might be right. You develop new instincts. How to tell who's about to break. How to know when silence means don't talk to me. How to recognize when the cook's tone shifts just enough to say, we're out of beans again. One sailor builds a board game using bottle caps and pencil shavings. It has rules so complex, no one wins. The game ends when someone walks away. That someone is usually you. You try to remember life outside. Music, fresh air, the smell of grass after rain, the shape of clouds. You realize you've forgotten the color of your front door, and it scares you. Not because it's gone, but because it doesn't feel important anymore. The radio operator picks up a faint signal, BBC maybe, or just static shaped like a voice. Everyone gathers around. For 10 minutes, you sit in hushed awe as a woman reads the news in clipped English tones. You don't understand it all, but it's beautiful. It sounds like a planet you once lived on. And just like that, it's gone. Back to the thrum. The pipe creaks. The lights flicker. Someone sneezes. And the moment vanishes like a dream, filed away in the growing archive of strangeness. You lie back, hands behind your head, and whisper, "Is this what madness feels like?" Your bunkmate answers without looking up. Only if you stop laughing. You wake up to a scratching sound, soft, rhythmic, just behind your ear. For a moment, you think it's part of a dream. Then it moves. And that's when you realize it's not. You bolt upright, smacking your head on the bunk above you, and pat yourself down like a man on fire. Lice. Again. Welcome to the other war happening inside the U-boat, the microbial one. There are 50 men in here. 1 toilet. 0 showers. Limited soap. No clean clothes. And now, a full-blown outbreak of head lice, skin rashes, fungal infections, and something that might be scabies but no one wants to ask. The medic, who once trained as a dentist but is now the keeper of all things itchy, makes his rounds with a flashlight and a tin of salve that smells like old vinegar and desperation. You sit in line with your shirt off, waiting for him to look at your armpits. He sighs as he sees the spreading rash near your ribs. Could be heat rash, could be ringworm. Try not to scratch. You nod, and immediately start scratching. There's no privacy for hygiene, no personal time for care. You brush your teeth with salty water. You clean your ears with the corner of your shirt. Your fingernails have gone black with grime. And everyone shares the same soap. One guy wears gloves at all times now. Another dabs his face with a handkerchief soaked in schnapps, claiming it kills bacteria. Someone starts boiling their socks in tea. No one tells them to stop. The toilet becomes a bottleneck, literally and figuratively. Built like a medieval puzzle, it has valves you must turn in the right order. If you forget, you risk backflow. And no one, not even your worst enemy, deserves U-boat backflow. One sailor did forget. Once. He now eats in silence and avoids eye contact with the pipes. Historians still argue whether submarine crews were more susceptible to disease or just had fewer means to treat it. Officially, the Navy sent them off with adequate medical supplies. Unofficially, you're one sore throat away from 18th century solutions. Someone has pink eye. It spreads like wildfire. Your left eye starts itching, then tearing up. Your bunkmate offers half of a used tissue and a sympathy grunt. Welcome to the Red Eye Club. Food poisoning is a constant danger. Cans dented in all the wrong ways get opened anyway. A questionable stew from 4 nights ago reappears in a new form. You think it's beef. The cook insists it's re-beef. You don't ask. The vomiting starts at 2 a.m. or whatever passes for 2 a.m. down here. First one guy, then 2. Soon, the whole aft section smells like the floor of a rotting deli. The medic shrugs and mutters, rotten meat or nerves, could be both. You wipe down your bunk with a damp rag and a sense of futility. The mildew is winning. Your mattress is suspiciously squishy. You poke it and watch the indent slowly rise. You stop poking. Fungus begins blooming on your boots. A small patch at first, then more, like moss creeping across a forgotten log. You name it Captain Mold. You joke about promoting him. Someone laughs. You both fall silent, and still, you sweat. Even when the boat dives into the cold Atlantic depths, the body heat of 50 men in a sealed metal tube keeps the air swampy. Shirts stick to your back. Socks glue to your feet. Underwear becomes an abstract concept of suffering. You ask for a towel. The supply officer offers you a rag that smells like pickled despair. You dab your forehead and feel instantly worse. Lice combs are passed around. You inspect your scalp under the dim red light and see movement. You try to act casual. You fail. It's normal, someone says. They get bored and move around. You stop asking questions. One sailor finds a tiny white worm in his stew. He calmly sets the bowl down and walks away. No one speaks of it again. You begin to realize that your immune system is doing more heavy lifting than the diesel engines. You're not staying healthy, you're simply outpacing illness. A delicate daily dance between exposure and collapse. Then there's the mental toll of watching others deteriorate. You notice how many men scratch compulsively, how many wince when sitting, from skin infections on their thighs. One guy shaves his head entirely to keep the lice away. He ends up with a scalp sunburn under the conning tower. He doesn't care. Worth it, he says. The radio operator wears mittens at night to stop himself from scratching in his sleep. You see him once in the galley, hands bleeding slightly, muttering something about beetles in his paws. The medic gives him aspirin. And a hug. That's the closest thing to therapy down here. When you ask if anyone's ever died from infection, the answer is, not here. Then, yet. There are remedies, passed down through generations of desperate sailors. Garlic under the arms. Toothpaste on bug bites. Vinegar foot baths using old pickle juice. One sailor wears cabbage leaves in his boots. He swears it keeps the spirits away. It might work, or the spirits are just afraid of the smell. Your own body becomes a battleground. You stop looking in mirrors. The red patch under your arm has grown into a full blotch. Your nails are brittle. Your gums bleed when you brush. You keep going, because you have no choice. You still do your shift, still eat your turnip mash, still smile at the sailor who now has a permanent cough. You're surviving. Barely, but surviving. And every once in a while, the boat surfaces. Cold air rushes in. You climb the conning tower, strip off your shirt, and let the salt wind bite your skin. You feel clean for just a second. Then someone sneezes directly behind you. And the moment is over. You've started to notice something odd. The crew isn't just tired or sick anymore. They're twitchy. Quiet in a different way. Not worn out, but watchful. There's tension. Thick, sour tension. Like the smell before a thunderstorm, but without the storm. Just that uneasy pressure behind your eyes and the knowledge that something's off. It begins subtly. A missed salute here. A sarcastic, "Yes, Herr Kalun," muttered a little too loudly. A strange pause before obeying orders. Then you catch two men whispering in the engine room, glancing around like teenagers hiding cigarettes. Except no one's laughing. You try to brush it off. Long patrols make everyone moody, right? But it keeps building. Someone forgets to pass along a command. Another takes twice as long to complete a simple task. You catch a junior officer double-checking the captain's navigational charts after he's already plotted a course. Then there's the cook. Usually, the most easygoing guy on board. He starts locking the galley cabinets. When asked why, he shrugs and says, "Some of us are getting impatient," and goes back to stirring a pot of what smells like despair and turnips. A senior crewman, one who's been on 3 patrols, says quietly over coffee, "It always happens around week 6. People stop seeing the officer as in charge and start seeing him as just another guy making mistakes. Historians still debate whether actual mutinies occurred aboard German U-boats. Official records say no, but personal diaries and post-war testimonies hint otherwise. Stories of sudden injuries, of captains relieved for health reasons, of sabotage written off as accidents. And here, now, you're starting to understand why. The captain has begun snapping. Not loudly, not violently, but with a clipped cold edge that wasn't there before. His jokes are gone. His orders have become commands barked with no explanation. You watch him stare at the sonar panel for 10 minutes straight without blinking. When someone taps him on the shoulder, he flinches like he's been shot. He's not the only one unraveling. A crewman throws a wrench across the room when a pipe leaks again. Another refuses to share a bunk, demanding his own space. Space? In a submarine? That's like asking for your own oxygen. You begin to feel it in the air, a kind of quiet defiance. Not open rebellion, but something simmering. A pulling away from order, a leaning toward chaos. Then, late one night, during silent running, you hear a heated argument echo from the control room. Two voices. One clearly the first officer, the other, you're not sure. They're arguing about depth, about risk, about orders. You hear the word suicidal. You don't hear the response. After that, things change. People whisper more. The navigator consults the chief engineer behind closed doors. Tools start going missing. Someone sabotages the radio, just a loose wire, easily fixed, but clearly intentional. The radio operator doesn't report it until the next shift. You hear someone joke that if the captain slips and falls down the ladder, no one would even bat an eye. Everyone laughs a little too hard. You stop laughing. During meals, the officers now sit alone. The division is clear. There's them, and there's us. The captain starts keeping the key to the torpedo compartment in his pocket at all times. Someone says, "He doesn't trust us." Another replies, "Should he? You think of the stories. Crews faking engine trouble to end a mission. Deliberately surfacing near Allied patrol zones. Once, someone claims, an entire crew simply opened the hatch one night and walked out into the sea. You want to believe it's nonsense. But the way he says it, calmly, like a lullaby, gives you chills. You catch the medic pulling the navigator aside. His voice is low, urgent. The navigator shakes his head. The medic walks away, muttering, "Just until we get home." That same day, the coffee goes missing. That's when you know it's serious. Coffee is the last sacrament aboard the U-boat. You can take the light, the air, even the dignity, but the coffee, that's a red line. The crew begins blaming each other. Accusations fly in whispers. He took it. No, he hid it. They're hoarding it for the officers. The cook ends up being tackled, when he reaches into the cabinet where the coffee used to be. He wasn't even looking for it. He was just getting salt. The man who tackled him gets confined to his bunk, not because the captain says so, but because 4 sailors agree to keep him there. You realize the chain of command is starting to fray. The first officer looks exhausted. The captain starts carrying his sidearm on his hip, technically allowed, but very rare. It's not even subtle. He wears it during meals, during inspections, even when he's in the conning tower, staring out at empty ocean like he's daring it to do something. You hear footsteps at odd hours, men meeting in supply rooms, a wrench left under the navigation table with a blood smear on it. No one asks. You don't want to know. And then it comes, the emergency dive. It happens fast. Sirens, yelling. You're wrenched from sleep and thrown into action. The crew dives deep, too deep, past safe depth. You're not sure if it's a real threat or a test or something else entirely. The pressure creaks around you. Someone cries out in pain as a pipe ruptures near the engine room. When it's over, the boat rises slowly, gently, like a nervous apology, but the damage is done. You look around at the pale, damp faces, eyes sunken, lips tight, knuckles white. Everyone is on edge. Everyone has secrets now. You realize the enemy above is dangerous, but the real danger may be inside, in the quiet breaking of loyalty, in the slow, steady unraveling of trust. No mutiny yet, but it's close. You can feel it. You're cold. Not open a window cold. Not put on a sweater cold. This is the deep, creeping cold of a steel coffin in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, thousands of meters beneath the surface. The kind of cold that feels like it's whispering through your bones. The heating system was never good to begin with. Now, it's just wheezing. The engineer shrugs and mutters something about a bad valve. There's no time to fix it. The boat is too deep. The mission is too urgent. The cold, it seems, is now part of the crew. You try to stay warm. Layer up. 2 shirts. A scarf. Someone offers you an extra pair of socks. You hesitate, then remember your own pair could stand up by themselves. You accept. The condensation turns icy. It drips from the ceiling in slow, freezing trails. Your bunk is constantly damp. You lie there at night, curled like a question mark, trying not to shiver loud enough to wake your bunkmate. And then there's the leaks. Tiny ones, at first, just little beads forming on the hull near the stern. A hissing noise here, a trickle there. The engineer walks past, taps the bulkhead with a wrench, and says, "Character building." You're not laughing. One night, you hear a distinct drip, drip, drip behind the control panel. The sound keeps you awake for hours. You start imagining it speeding up, growing louder, turning into a rushing flood. You finally get up and go check, only to find a sailor already there, holding a rag, staring at the same leak. Neither of you says a word. You just nod. The cold isn't just temperature, it's mental. It wraps around you like dread. The boat groans with every shift of pressure. At this depth, the ocean isn't water, it's weight. It pushes in from every direction, a liquid tombstone pressing against your skin. One sailor taps the wall and says, "We're closer to the Titanic than to Berlin right now." No one responds. Historians still argue whether late-war U-boats were properly reinforced for these depths. Some believe the metal was stretched too thin, literally. German steel was in short supply by 1944, and the pressure hulls began to show it. A few boats imploded with no warning. Others cracked slowly, painfully. You're hoping for neither. But hope isn't regulation equipment. During silent running, you hear everything. Every creak becomes a scream. Every pop of contracting steel sounds like a death knell. You lie still, breathing shallow, trying to ignore the sound of the hull flexing with every shift of the sea. The batteries begin to struggle. The gauges flicker. Someone whispers, "We're overtaxed." Another says, "We're over it." You start losing power in sections of the boat. Lights dim, then go out. You eat in near darkness. You navigate by touch. At one point, you walk straight into a pipe and crack your forehead open. The medic tapes it shut with gauze that smells like soup. You ask how much longer the patrol will last. No one knows. The maps are out. The charts are filled with X's and scribbled notes. The radio officer mutters something about intercepted signals. The captain stares at the sonar like it owes him money. Then the engines hiccup. Just for a second. A sharp grind. A loud knock. Then silence. Everyone freezes. You look around and realize half the boat has stopped breathing. The mechanic bolts for the engine room. The rest of you wait, hands clenched, cold sweat dripping down already freezing backs. 2 minutes later, the engines cough back to life. Not a roar, just a low, tired grumble, like a wounded beast agreeing to keep crawling. The mechanic returns, his face pale. Main bearing slipped, he says. If it happens again, we'll need to surface. But surfacing is a gamble. Up there are Allied planes, depth charges, detection, maybe even mines. The only thing worse than dying deep is dying while being seen. And yet, down here, the cold keeps rising. Frost forms on metal. Your breath is visible when you speak. You sleep with gloves on, hat pulled over your ears. The condensation on your ceiling bunk starts freezing in spots, tiny crystals sparkling in the red light like Christmas decorations from hell. Someone slips in the galley and breaks 2 fingers. They swell, then bruise, then go gray. Circulation's failing, the medic says. Keep moving. So the sailor does jumping jacks in the corner for 15 minutes. No one even looks up. You start hallucinating warmth. You swear you feel sunlight on your face. You press your eyes closed and picture beaches, fireplaces, the radiator back home humming quietly in your childhood bedroom. You imagine laying your cold feet on the sun-warmed pavement. You open your eyes. Steel, steam, silence. One sailor tries to light a candle he smuggled aboard, just to warm his fingers. The flame flickers for a second, then sputters out. The cook yells at him. If you start a fire in this tin can, we'll all be warm. Once. You laugh. Too loud. The cook stares at you for a beat too long. You nod. He nods. The moment passes. It's colder now. The crew stops talking about temperature. There's nothing left to say. You just layer up, move slower, and hope the engine doesn't die again. You dream one night of surfacing, of sunlight pouring through the hatch like honey. Everyone climbs up to the conning tower. They stretch, smile, breathe. The captain laughs. You wake up gritting your teeth, the dream's warmth evaporating like breath on a frosted window. The cold is winning, and you're not sure who'll break first, your spirit or the hull. It's getting hard to breathe. Not in a panicky, gasping for air kind of way, at least not yet. But you feel it, a thick heaviness in your lungs, like each inhale has to be dragged in through molasses. Your head aches constantly. Your mouth tastes metallic. The stale air now carries a sour, almost coppery bite. Oxygen levels are dropping. You're deep underwater. The engines have been off for hours, silent running. No surfacing, which means no fresh air. Just the same recycled breath, over and over, exhaled and inhaled by 50 exhausted men inside a steel tube. The chemical scrubbers, those metal boxes filled with soda lime, are doing their best to filter out the carbon dioxide. But they were never meant to handle this long without relief. You walk past one and see the technician fanning it with a clipboard. Not effective, but it makes him feel useful. One sailor passes out while climbing into his bunk. No warning. He just slumps over like a puppet with the strings cut. The medic rushes in, checks his pulse, slaps his face, and mutters, "CO saturation." The man wakes with a groan. You move him to a cooler part of the boat and hope it doesn't happen again. It does. Another man starts vomiting. Then a third. No one eats much anymore anyway. Your body doesn't want food. It wants air. The captain is tense. You see him pacing more, checking instruments, staring at oxygen gauges that haven't moved in hours. The air is thin. The red lights feel hotter now. Everything smells like sweat, rust, and vinegar. You can't remember what the sky looks like. The debate begins. spoken quietly, behind bulkheads and in the gaps between orders. Surface or die. But surfacing means exposing yourself to the enemy, to sonar, to planes, to depth charges from above. Historians still argue whether captains made these decisions based on tactics or emotion, fear or logic. Some claim crews begged to surface just for a few minutes of real air, even knowing they might be bombed the moment they rose. Others say commanders pushed their luck too far, trusting machines over men. You glance at the pressure gauge. It's not lying. You're suffocating. The navigator proposes a combat blow, an emergency ascent that uses compressed air to rocket the U-boat toward the surface in seconds. It's risky. Fast ascents can rupture lungs, cause ballast failure, or flip the boat like a torpedoed fish. But it might be the only shot. You're assigned to prep the forward compartment, lock the watertight hatches, secure the ladders, make sure the bunks are clear. Every motion feels heavier, like you're moving through soup. You realize your hands are shaking. The captain calls for silence. His voice cracks slightly. He announces the decision. We surface. 10 minutes. Then back under. That's it. You brace. The dive planes adjust with a lurch. The hull creaks and groans, rising against the weight of the Atlantic. You feel the pitch shift. The floor tilts under your boots. Your ears pop, sharp and painful, as the pressure begins to ease. Someone whispers a prayer, another hums a lullaby. The ascent is fast. Violent. A sudden whoosh echoes through the boat as compressed air fills the ballast tanks. The U-boat lunges upward like a steel whale desperate for breath. You're pressed back against the wall. The lights flicker. A crate tips over and crashes into someone's leg. They howl. You burst through the surface with a sickening shudder. The hatch clangs open. Fresh air pours in like salvation. It hits you so hard you nearly choke on it. It's cold, sharp, unfiltered life. You gulp it in like you've been drowning. Because, in a way, you have. Men take turns climbing to the conning tower. Some cry, some laugh. Most just breathe, slow, greedy breaths that fill their lungs and make their chests ache. You look up. The stars are there, distant, frozen, watching. No sign of planes, no spotlights, no explosions, just sea and sky and the faint sound of waves slapping your hull like applause. The captain orders venting, blowing the stale air from the boat and refilling the tanks. It smells terrible. A cloud of warm, dead-smelling gas escapes like the breath of a sunken beast. But it's out. Gone. For now. The cook appears with a can of beans and a spoon. It's a celebration. A man cracks open his last piece of chocolate and shares it in tiny flakes. You taste nothing but salt and metal, but it's glorious. Then, movement. Far on the horizon, a shape. Could be a wave, could be a cloud, could be them. The captain doesn't wait. Dive. You're back at it. Alarms blare, hatches slam. The conning tower seals. Ballast tanks release. The boat sinks again, fast but not frantic. Controlled. Deliberate. The sea swallows you once more, and you're back inside the darkness, back inside the hum and creak and sweat. But this time, your lungs are full, your mind a little clearer. You feel like you've borrowed time. 10 minutes of air. That's all it took to pull you from the edge. 10 minutes of sky, of salt, of remembering what it feels like to live. Back below, the oxygen system restarts. The air smells slightly better. The temperature dips. Someone lights a candle briefly, against orders, but no one reports it. You lie in your bunk, staring at the ceiling, watching the condensation bead again. Your ribs ache from breathing too hard. Your lips are cracked. Your pulse, finally, slows. You're still in the steel tomb. But now, you remember the stars. You're staring at a rivet. Not for any reason. It's just there, directly above your bunk, slightly off-center. You've counted it 16 times. You've given it a name. Otto. Otto the rivet. Why? Because your world has shrunk to metal, breath, and waiting. And now, the mission is nearly over. Or so they say. No one trusts the mission clock anymore. The captain says 2 more days. The radio officer says 3. A sailor near the stern swears he overheard 5. Either way, the crew is holding on by threads, ragged, sweat-soaked, half-whispered threads. But you've made it this far, and yet, survival doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a dare. Because even now, with land somewhere over the horizon and the boat angling home, you're not safe. Not really. The Allies know U-boats head back through choke points, corridors of ocean narrowed by geography and war. They wait. Aircraft patrol relentlessly. Frigates drag sonar nets. Mines drift silently, ready to explode if you so much as burp in their direction. You think back on everything, on the stench, the mildew, the deafening silence, the depth charges, the cold, the fights, the oxygen games. You should be proud. But all you feel is tense. Because this is the most dangerous part. Historians often point out that many U-boats were lost not during the meat of the patrol, but at the very end, within a few dozen miles of home. That final approach was when caution cracked, when hope started to taste too real, when the enemy struck with surgical precision. You pass a crewman in the hallway. He smiles. Not a fake smile, but a real one. And it terrifies you. Real smiles on a U-boat mean someone's planning their first beer back on land, their first bath, a letter to their sweetheart. It's a curse. You try not to think about it, but your own mind begins cataloging all the things you'll do if you survive. Fresh fruit, a chair with a back, socks that don't smell like regret, a silence that isn't alive with fear. You picture yourself on a train, watching trees blur past, drinking tea that wasn't made with engine water, hearing a voice on a loudspeaker that doesn't make your stomach clench. You picture being free, and that's when you hear it. A crackling buzz from the sonar station, then the soft voice of the operator. Contact, surface ship. Distance unknown, bearing closing. No alarms. Not yet. Just a ripple. The boat stiffens. You feel it. How everyone goes rigid, eyes narrowing, mouths setting into straight lines. The captain listens. Then, silent running. Hold depth. And you're back to it. The hum of the engines fades. The lights dim. The metallic belly of the beast goes quiet once more. You hear every creak, every drip, every breath. Somewhere above you, possibly right above, a destroyer glides through the sea like a blade. You don't know if it sees you. You don't know if it's armed. You don't know if the war has already found you again. The depth charge fear returns, not like before, not chaos, but dread. That dull, icy dread that nests behind your ribcage. You glance at Otto the rivet. He offers no comfort, no explosions yet. But waiting is its own kind of violence. You think about surrender, what that would even look like. The captain waves a white sheet through the conning tower. They haul you up on deck like fish. You spend the rest of the war in a camp somewhere in Canada, peeling potatoes? Would that be worse? Some say yes, some say no, the men whisper. If they catch us, do we scuttle? Does he have the nerve to fire the torpedoes? Will we make it home, or will we be a dot on the next guy's map? The answers don't come. The commander's hands tremble slightly. He hides it well, but you notice. You all do. You notice everything now. You've become experts in fear, in body language, in failure. The sonar pings again. Louder this time. Closer. You clutch a pipe, not out of necessity, just instinct. You feel the cold through your palms. You imagine water rushing in. Not cinematic, just fast. Final, done. Then, nothing. Silence. The contact moves away. A full hour passes before the captain gives the order. Engines ahead. Maintain depth. Plot home course. The entire boat exhales. It's audible. You smile, but don't celebrate. Not yet. Later that night, if it is night, you climb into the conning tower during a surface run. You breathe in the air, salty and sharp. You see a sliver of moonlight, and you cry. Just a little. No sobs. Just tears sliding down your cheeks like something remembered. It's too dark for anyone to see. You realize something. You're still alive. Somehow, impossibly, still here. And so is everyone else. No mutiny. No implosion. No madness, at least not the kind that sinks the boat. You picture yourself walking off this thing. You picture land, shoes on dry ground, your own bed, a cup of soup with no mystery in it. You don't know if it'll happen. But for now, for just one breath, the nightmare is holding off. And tomorrow might be yours. It's morning, maybe. The lights haven't changed. The air still smells like iron and onions. But something in the rhythm of the crew is different, lighter, almost. There's a murmur you haven't heard before. An almost unspoken maybe. Maybe this is the last day. The captain walks through the corridor with a slower step. Still stiff, still guarded, but the grim mask has softened. He even nods to a crewman polishing a depth gauge. Not a command nod. A human one. You're close. Close enough that the radio operator is whispering coordinates under his breath like a prayer. Close enough that the navigator has cleared off the plotting table and begun folding charts. Quietly, precisely, like a ritual. Close enough that you've dared to wash your face. Cold water, a dry rag, a little soap the size of a sugar cube. It's the first time in weeks you feel like a person again. Your reflection, though faint in a scratched piece of steel, doesn't look like a stranger anymore. Still, no one says home. Not aloud. As if naming it will make it vanish. The crew works with a strange efficiency now. Not out of fear, but anticipation. Tools are cleaned. Surfaces wiped. Men comb their hair with fingers. Some even pull out photos from lockers. Creased, yellowed, worn paper that smells like land and memory. You glance at yours, a photo of your mother on a park bench. You forgot you had it. Now, it looks almost unreal. Was that real? Or just another dream crafted in diesel fumes and salt? The cook prepares something special. Or, at least, different. He found a can of sardines labeled delicatessen. Probably a lie, but it's the nicest word anyone's read in a month. He serves it with crisp bread, a rare treat. It's dry, crumbly, and exquisite. You eat slowly. Above deck, the sea is calm. A rare mercy. The conning tower is open. The sky a soft grey blue, streaked with clouds that stretch like sighs across the horizon. You stand there for as long as you can, letting the air roll over your face, through your hair, past the grime and scars and sleeplessness. It smells like salt and rain. It smells like survival. Then, like a whispered afterthought from God himself, land appears. Just a sliver. Just a suggestion. But it's there. Someone sees it first and says nothing, just points. A finger, shaking slightly, stretched out toward the eastern edge of vision. The crew gathers, quietly. Like worshippers. A few smile. One man drops to his knees, muttering thanks in a language no one else understands. Another begins laughing softly, then covers his mouth like he's afraid the sound might carry. You don't cheer. None of you do. It's not that kind of joy. It's something heavier. A bone-deep relief, soaked in disbelief. You're going home. The U-boat angles toward port. The final approach. You pass the outlines of other vessels, shapes that don't fire, don't turn, don't the kind of peace that tastes unreal, like candy after a fever. You dock without ceremony. Ropes tossed. Orders called. Boots clanging on metal. Then the hatch opens. Real daylight. The first you've seen in weeks. You squint, tears forming even though you didn't mean for them to. The light doesn't just hit your face, it pierces you. It's too bright, too honest. You climb out. The dock smells like fish, wood, and coal smoke. You've never loved anything more. You stagger slightly, land legs wobbling after weeks of moving with the sea. A crewman next to you stumbles and laughs. Another kneels and kisses the ground. You don't blame him. The officers disembark last. The captain walks to the edge of the dock and stops, staring into the water for a long time. Then he turns and nods, once, and disappears into the yard. You don't speak. You breathe. And for the first time in what feels like forever, the air tastes new. You don't know what comes next. War is still out there. You might be sent out again. You might never be the same. But right now, in this exact moment, you're alive, and you've stepped out of the belly of the beast. The U-boat sits behind you, silent, still, its mission complete. It will be cleaned, repaired, restocked. But part of it, your part of it, will always carry the shadows of this journey. The heat, the cold, the darkness, the fear, the noise, the silence, and the deep, primal understanding that you weren't supposed to survive. But somehow you did. Now the sky begins to fade into softer tones. The harsh grays of steel and ocean memory melt into warmer hues. Golden, gentle, forgiving. You can almost feel the last vibrations of the U-boat hum disappearing from your bones. A silence settles in, not the fearful kind, but the restful one. The kind that says, it's over now. You rest your hands on something solid. Not metal, not machinery. Just earth. Quiet, unmoving earth. And the breeze, finally, feels like a breeze, not a warning. The memories drift backward now, like slow bubbles in still water. The claustrophobia. The mildew. The socks. The cold. They soften at the edges. You can't forget, but you don't have to relive it anymore. You breathe in, full, deep, peaceful. The way you couldn't down there. You exhale the echoes of that steel cage, of torpedoes and red lights, of whispers in the dark. And slowly, your body lets go. Your shoulders fall. Your eyes grow heavy. The sea, once an enemy, now seems distant and calm. A lullaby in the background. You survived what most wouldn't. You're here. And it's quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't need to be feared. The kind that welcomes you into sleep. Let it take you. Let the ocean fade behind. Let the stars above shine soft and small again. You're home. End of script. Sweet dreams.